But in pursuance of the policy of creating political climate healthy enough to make one a citizen wherever he lived, this is where I'm going. Dr. Azikiwe contested and won the general elections in 1951 into the Western House of Assembly. To stultify this policy of one Nigeria in favor of his tribally based philosophy, Chief Awolowo got some elected members to cross the carpet from the NCNC to his AG side. Zik the victor lost, and Awolowo's party was able to form the government of the Western region. That was the beginning of rigid tribalism and carpet crossing through the purchase of political party members. That incident shook the advocates of one Nigeria to the marrows, and the politics of Nigeria has never recovered from the tremors of that vicious maneuver ever since. Just to be clear, Kingsley Badiwe was fantastically dishonest. That's not what happened. So if you were here yesterday, we went through all of those things. When he said that they cross-carpeted from NCNC to AG, it is not true. So what really happened was this. Did Zik win? Yes, Zik won. But what did Zik win? His seat. One seat. Zik won his seat. And the nonsense about the fact that it was a tribally based philosophy, it's nothing, there's no sense in it. And the reason is because Zik won a seat, but Zik's party did not win the majority in the House. The political philosophy of Chief Obafemi Awolowo by Olayiwola Abegunrin. The 1951 parliamentary elections was contested by two main political parties. The Action Group and the NCNC vied for supremacy in the Western Nigeria, although there were other local parties, mostly cultural organizations without affiliation to the AG or the NCNC before the elections. Remember that phrase, without affiliation. In other words, those cultural organizations, those local parties were not connected with either of those parties. When you read any book you read from the East, please, I'm begging them of God, please read books from other places. I don't care if you're reading from China, just to be sure that what they said is true. Every single book I've read from Eastern authors in Nigerian political history. Now lie they full. It's just the truth. Now lie they full. He says that let me read what he said, because I like to compare so that we know exactly where we are. It becomes easier for us to enjoy the session. He says Chief Awolowo got some members to cross the carpet from the NCNC to his AG site. That's what he said. That Awo got some elected members to cross the carpet from the NCNC to Action Group. That's what he said. But what really happened, that's not what happened. What happened was that those people who crossed did not belong to either AG or NCNC. As a matter of fact, they were members of local organizations such as Ibadan People's Party, Ibadan Citizens Council in Ibadan, Ondo Improvement League in Ondo, Otuedo in Benin, Nigerian People's Congress (NPC) in Lagos. Before the elections, the public relations officer of the Nigerian government, Mr. Harold Cooper, wrote to all political parties contesting the elections to make known names of their candidates for the final elections to the House of Assembly. In addition, Mr. Cooper told newsmen at a press conference that this would help his departments to identify the party to which elected candidates belong when issuing press releases or broadcasting results of the final election on Monday, September 22nd. It is understood that letters have been dispatched to the secretariats of the NCNC, the Action Group, the Nigerian People's Congress, and other parties contesting the elections. The Action Group submitted its list of candidates, while the NCNC did not submit or publish the names of its candidates. So think about it for a second. Imagine you're going to have elections, then they ask you, give us the list of all the people that will be contesting from your place, and then your party did not provide any list. In other words, we don't even know people from your place who are running. But the AG did something different. Not only did they send the list to Harold Cooper, they also published it in newspapers, in the Daily Service and Nigerian Tribune. It says, in addition, the Action Group list was released before the final elections and published in the Daily Service and the Nigerian Tribune on and before the September 24, 1951, the day of the final election in most parts of the West. Chief A.M.A. Akinloye, Chief Moyo Aboderin, Chief D.T. Akinbiyi, Chief S.O. Lanleyin, Chief S.A. Akinyemi, and Alhaji Adekoke Adelabu all contested on NCNC tickets no. on Ibadan People's Party IPP Egbe Omo Ibile platform and won. They did not win as NCNC members. They were independent of both the AG and the NCNC. Only Alhaji Adedibu went with the NCNC. But if that's the truth, how do we hear the idea that NCC won? Let me read something to you from Azikiwe's own book, My Odyssey. This is from Zik himself. Towards the end of 1951, this is Azikiwe, I stood for another election, this time to the Western House of Assembly as a representative of Lagos, under the Macpherson Constitution, and I topped the poll. The NCNC was under the impression that, listen to this, the NCNC, who is the NCNC, the party? The NCNC was under the impression that it had won the election with 43 members out of 80. Have you ever heard a politician say that, oh, we lost, but we were under the impression that we won, therefore we won? It's just that he now poached people that were in our party who won for us already. We were under the impression. That impression was what Mbadiwe now fleshed out by saying Awolowo took NCNC members. But let's go back to the book on political philosophy of Awolowo. So he says here, Adelabu went with the NCNC. There were 6 from Ibadan People's Party. 5 of them decided to join AG. 1 joined NCNC. NCNC people said they were NCNC members because they expected them to join NCNC. But let's listen to one of them who had something to say about what really happened in 1951. His name is Chief Abodering. He says, Dr. Azikiwe had sent telegrams to all the 6 elected members of Ibadan People's Party, urging them to join his party, the NCNC. Dr. Azikiwe's strategy was, however, faulty, since he relied mostly on Adelabu and Akinloye, and thought that by getting the 2 of them, he would be able to switch the other members to his camp. I favored the action group, and I succeeded in getting all the members with the exception of Adelabu to the action group. The popular idea that the IPP cross-carpeted from the NCNC to the action group is therefore erroneous. Why? They were never in NCNC. At the close of the election on September 24, 1951, the action group, judging by its list of candidates released before the election, had won 38. By the way, Zik was waiting for 43 out of 80. He only got 25. And because Adelabu was so gracious, he joined NCNC, so he had 26 out of 80. And the pain is what people are still carrying today. It's the pain of loss. And why they lost, we'll get to that very soon. That is part of it. At the close of the election on September 24, 1951, the action group, judging by its list of candidates released before the election, had won 38 out of 72 seats contested. 3 days later, 3 candidates who contested as independent and won joined forces with their colleagues to sign the action group pact of loyalty. They were Alhaji DS Adegbenro, Egba Division, J.O. Osuntokun, Ekiti Division, S.O. Hassan, Ekpe Division. Those ones were independent candidates, but they decided to join action group, making it 41. Chief Adeola Odutola contested and won as an independent in Ijebu-Ode, and after the election, he declared for the AG. Chief Adeola Odutola's declaration for the action group was announced by Chief Bode Thomas in the Daily Times of November 1, 1951. In addition, 3 Otu Edo members, including Eso Ighodaro, Benin Province, won on the platform of the local party, but he also declared for the action group. The Western Regional elections of November 51 gave the action group a majority of 44 seats out of 75 in the Western Nigerian House of Assembly. Only in Lagos were the 5 seats won by the NCNC, led by Nnamdi Azikiwe. And there were internal squabbles and indiscipline within the party, which led to all 5 NCNC legislators contesting among themselves for the 2 seats allocated to Lagos in the House of Representatives. I'll explain all these things. While the 1951 became the seat of discord, the results in Lagos, as recorded in Daily Times on November 22, 1951, had noted that, quote, the election result was a disappointment to the NCNC, whose leader, Nnamdi Azikiwe, has anticipated a majority in the regional and central federal legislature prior to the election. Azikiwe declared that he would not accept a ministerial post in an inferior legislature of the colonial type. The loss crippled the plan of the NCNC leader to paralyze the machinery of government, which will lead to the reformulation of a new constitution for Nigeria. Obviously, the election outcome gave a majority to the action group, meaning that the NCNC could not form the Western Regional Government as Nnamdi Azikiwe had hoped. However, the results in Lagos gave NCNC some hope that its national president, Nnamdi Azikiwe, would become a leader in the federal legislature, because under the Macpherson Constitution, a stipulated number of representatives from each administrative division was to be elected to the Federal House of Representatives from the Western House of Assembly. When the Western Nigeria House of Assembly met for the first time on January 7, 1952, 49 members instead of 44 declared for the action group, thus culminating in a controversy that created a long mistrust between Chief Awolowo and Azikiwe. Let me quickly explain some things. But by the way, there's a table here that has the number of seats won. NCNC had 2 in Abo, 3 in Asaba, 1 in Ekiti, 2 in Ijesha, 1 in Ishan, 1 in Kukuruku. They don't call it that again, they call it now, they call it Afemai. 5 in Lagos, 1 in Okutukpukpa, 1 in Owo, 5 in Urobo, 1 in Warri, and 1 in Western Ijo. But Action Group had 2 in Badagry, 4 in Egba, 3 in Egbado, now Yewa, 2 in Ekiti, 1 in Ekpe, 2 in Ife, 2 in Ijebu-Ode, 2 in Ijebu-Remo. Actually, that Ijebu-Ode, the third person, there were 3, but they won 2. The third person who was independent eventually still joined Action Group. 2 in Ikeja. There's an independent in Elisha. I think he also joined Action Group. 2 in Ikeja, 1 in Ishan, 1 in Okutukpukpa, 7 in Osun, 7 of 7, 2 in Owo, 5 in Oyo, 1 in Warri, 1 in 2, and then 1 in Western Ijo, 1 in 2. All right. Now, what really happened was that we already read what happened, so you got it, the West won. But what could have happened was that even though Azikiwe would be in Ibadan, by the way, what I'm saying is about Western Regional. In other words, Azikiwe won a seat in Lagos to be in Ibadan as a representative, and he won. As a matter of fact, his party, NCNC, won all 5 seats in Lagos in 1951. Now those 5 people are in Ibadan. But according to the Macpherson Constitution, 2 of them will still be in Lagos, like in the federal legislature representing Lagos, right? And since they're all NCNC, it means that 2 of them would have to go and represent Lagos, but they have to also be sent from Ibadan, from the Western region. One of the things about Azikiwe is that everybody knows, everybody who wrote about him, who is not Igbo, well, how do I say it? Well, people who wrote about him, mentioned how he was a terrible leader. And you see it in the books that we're going to read today. He was not able to get the 5 people to decide who would represent NCNC and Lagos in the federal legislature. He lost his leadership position because when people say things like, oh, okay, so they sent him back to the east. No, he ran back to the east because he could not compete with those in the west. I'm not even talking about inter-party. I'm not saying NCNC versus AG. I'm saying within the party, they could not come to an agreement as to who would represent. So you have 2 seats, you have 5 representatives, and all 5 wanted the seats. And all 5, of course, included Zik himself. Let's read a bit from here before we move on. Apparently, the action group led by Chief Awolowo was able to organize the Western Regional Government with a comfortable margin, AG 49 and NCNC 26, but the House of Assembly was required to elect 2 of the 5 NCNC representatives from Lagos to the House of Representatives. The action group majority in the House voted for Dr. Lorun Nimbe, NCNC, a Yoruba, and Prince Adeleke Adedoyin, a Yoruba, who later joined the action group, neither of whom would step down in favor of their leader, Dr. Azikiwe, NCNC, and Igbo. In other words, within the party. I mean, number one, action group should not be the one to help you organize who should represent you. The action group can choose who they want to choose within the party, even if they chose those 2, which they did. you could have had a conversation amongst them and say, okay, let me go, you go, and all of that. But neither of them wanted to step down. And by the way, I think it was Remy was saying this yesterday, that Zik also traveled all the way to convince the Akarigbo to tell Adedoyin to step down for him. Prince Adeleke Adedoyin was in Lagos, was Yoruba, but he was a Remo man. I was from Remo. So going to tell his father to allow you to step down for you also doesn't make sense. I mean, anyway, the point is that having lost their respect and having lost a seat, he had only one other option. The other option is to sit in Ibadan. In other words, you be in Ibadan and be the leader of the minority. But Zik thought he was too big to be that, and that's why he said he wasn't going to be a leader in a lower space, and therefore he decided to leave. And that's that about that. How they played that game. Oh, it was tribal. Well, Zik was a tribalist. I think the thing is, before this stuff, Zik always won. So I'm reading the book by Zik himself. This is his autobiography. It's called My Odyssey. So he says, with the remaining 23 members in the Western House of Assembly, out of a membership of 80 plus, the NCNC decided to go into opposition since the action group had been invited by the Lieutenant Governor to form the government of Western Region. The government party refused to accord official recognition either to the opposition or to me as leader of the opposition. Nevertheless, an opposition existed de facto, and the action group could not ignore or extinguish it. What is he saying? Is it true? No, it's not true. The point is that he was not seen by his own party members as fit enough to lead them, even in the parliament. And if you also notice, Zik's problem is always everybody else, but he never takes responsibility for anything, at least so far. So he says here, before the elections, before the end of 1952, a crisis loomed in the ranks of the NCNC as a result of the unwillingness of certain NCNC-appointed federal and regional ministers to toe the party line. This is a long story which I hope to expand in a later volume. Consequently, I was drafted to contest an election into the Eastern House of Assembly and regularize this irregularity. Let me just ask a question in the comment section. If you think they drafted him, you know they did not draft this man. This man actually... So, I mean, let me explain. The only reason, or the primary reason I should say, that Zik ran to represent Lagos in the Western region was to become the leader of government business, which would make him eventually the premier of the Western region. And having won, he thought he was going to have that, but he did not have it. Therefore, he felt he was too big to be the leader of the minority, and then he went to the East. It was not that they called him from the East, it was that he went to the East because what he could not do in the West, he tried to do in the East, and by the way, he succeeded.